Hello and welcome to the Booster Pack. My name is Rands, and this is the show where we unwrap the stories and crack the mysteries of collectible games each and every episode. And on today's show, we're actually doing something a bit different to what we normally do, because rather than staring back into the past to unlock the secrets of TCGs of yesteryear, we're actually looking towards a trading card game that we're getting this year on the horizon in 2022. That is called Dspirits. Now, don't fret if you haven't heard of Dspirits yet, because it is, by the end of this episode, going to be something that you're well familiar with, and perhaps, like me, you may even want to run out, grab some packs when they become available to deck build and have your very own D-Squad members be super D-summoned into D-Spirit battles against fellow detectives. Now, to help us break down that bit of a mouthful, we've got somebody who will explain it all to us. And in fact, it's probably the person the best to do so, because we've got with us the creator of all this. Now, let me introduce him, and also his extensive artistic career that he's already had before venturing into the TCG world. Now, our guest today is an illustrator, an animator, and a toy maker, among several other talents. He has put out already a back catalogue that has received rapturous accolades from all over, whether that's printed press or film festival audiences, or perhaps most importantly, kids of all ages. Yes, he is responsible for some amazing animated series that are thoughtful, charming, and unapologetically optimistic. Those titles include The Fabulous World of Folklore, Happy Hair, and Faith McGrace. But as I said, he's got a new creation called Dspirits, and like those, they are also full of a world of diverse, silly, playful, heartfelt new characters that anybody can fall in love with. And personally, I can't wait to learn more about them. So without further ado, I am delighted to welcome to the Booster Pack somebody who is, even in their hometown of Atlanta, Georgia, already known as the Black Walt Disney. It is somebody who is a TCG triple threat, a trading card game artist, a trading card game designer, and a trading card game publisher. That is, of course, an animation extraordinaire, the father of Dspirits, and the founder of SterlingCartoons. Why, it's Sterling himself. Sterling, how are you?
Hi, what an introduction. Hey, Rands. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. I mean, that's an impressive slew of things to talk about already.
Okay, I don't even feel like I need to say anything else. You said everything for me.
Like I said, we like to start these episodes high energy. So let's get into it, shall we? So let's start with your background. Like, obviously, you know, we just explained how much of a creative background you've got, but let's go to the game side of things. Your personal history, tell me about why you decided to bring out a trading card game. And most importantly, like, what's your personal history with trading card games or collectible card games?
Yeah, so I started off, I'm still to this day a huge fan of Pokemon. I started off as a major fan of Pokemon, collecting the cards, not really necessarily knowing too much how to play the game, but I just loved the characters. And then it just was something natural that all the kids on the playground did. You know, during that time it was such a phenomenon. Everybody, you know, was playing Pokemon. Now, then I want to say a couple of years after, you know, the phenomenon, Yu-Gi-Oh came about, and that was like the biggest and greatest thing on the block. So I got really into actually playing the Yu-Gi-Oh card game, because to me that was a lot more simpler and easier to understand from Pokemon. And just as I got into art and had my art career, I always dreamed of creating my own monster tamer series, and that kind of started my ambition to create my own trading card game.
Well, it looks like it shares so much DNA with the things that I grew up with. Things like Digimon, things like Pokemon, things like Beyblades, all sorts of different series. Like, you obviously mentioned playing Yu-Gi-Oh on the playground, like playing Yu-Gi-Oh in tournaments and stuff there, and playing Pokemon on the playground. Obviously, they left a lasting impression on you too. But like, what other creative influences, like whether it's from anime or cartoons or anywhere, are you funneling into this project?
Definitely heavy into anime. So I grew up watching Dragon Ball Z, countless anime movies by Hayao Miyazaki, Studio Ghibli.
Oh, nice.
And then just my interactions with life. A lot of the characters in Dspirits are based off of like hip hop culture, slang, things like that. So just a combination of all the things that I like. Some things like about food, some stuff so greedy. So we have food monsters and everything like that. So I wouldn't say that would be my combination into wanting to do it.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned it there. You know, hip hop culture and popular culture, like not just Japanese popular culture, like we were talking about, but all sorts of popular culture. I mean, I've seen that there's a D-Spirit based on like creepy pastas, and there's D-Spirits based on, you know, kitchen utensils. All sorts of different types of monsters are out there. I love that. And you don't see that in other those other two franchises that we mentioned, like Yu-Gi-Oh and Pokemon and stuff. So back to the trading card game history. So the only trading card game you personally played like competitively or whatever was just Yu-Gi-Oh?
Yes, it was. I know about Magic, but I didn't grow up around people who played it. So that wasn't something I necessarily was into. Like I said, my gateway into cards really was because of Pokemon, but I did not play the actual game on a competitive standpoint. But definitely Yu-Gi-Oh was very easy for me to understand. So that's what I spent time playing. I went to like the tournaments that they would have, the I don't remember the name, but the fiestas or whatever they would have every or so, where it would be like, you know, hundreds of players. And that's kind of like where I spent my time playing cards.
Right. Do you remember, just because I'm always so curious, and I was probably playing about the same time as you, do you remember having a favorite deck type or something like that at the time?
See, I love the insects, but the only thing, so I would watch the anime, and one of my favorite characters was Weevil Underwood.
Oh, yeah. With his giant moth?
Yes, with perfectly ultimate Great Moth and Insect Queen. Um, oh, Pinch Hopper, I would use that in my deck and stuff. So I really loved it, but unfortunately, like with Yu-Gi-Oh, you know, there's such a like a huge power creep, and if like you don't get the newest and latest decks that will come out, like my little insect deck would be nothing compared to like I think when I stopped playing was around like Judgment Dragon and stuff, and I was like, whoa, like, this does not. There's no way I can keep up with this. So
Yeah, I feel like I missed a couple of sets as well, and then went back to it, and I'm like, oh wait, that's how you can summon monsters now? That used to be a fusion deck. How are you getting stuff out of there? It was a different time.
yeah, it's crazy now. So, but that's when I was playing. That's what I love to use was the insect deck.
That's awesome. Well, we will bring that up later. I'll put a pin in it in my mental notes there, because I would love to talk about how those sort of card types and stuff bleed into the gameplay of D-Spirits specifically, because I noticed that there's a huge variety of different card types and stuff. But what I will do is let's just introduce the story first, because I don't know much about the story. And the thing you mentioned is you used to watch the Yu-Gi-Oh anime, and that taught you how to play the card game, basically. It was the best commercial for those cards ever, was watching, you know, Weevil Underwood versus Yugi Moto, and you're like, right, I want to play that giant moth. So tell me, what is the D-Spirit story? I don't know much about it. Like, let's start with a real simple one. What are D-Spirits?
So D-Spirits stands for digital spirits. They basically, well, in the lore, they basically were these beings, these creatures that had all these amazing powers, but they were unruly. So a scientist created a way to seal them into cards. And now the cards can be used and played by people all over the world. And in battle, those spirits are summoned in battle and, you know, are under their master's bidding.
Oh, wow. Okay, so in this, in the narrative of D-Spirits, it does take influence from things like Duel Masters and Yu-Gi-Oh! And Wix Cross, where the play, like the human characters are playing the card game themselves the same way that we would as in our lives.
Half and half, not exactly. So hopefully we will be having two different series, one that will be an animated version of like people actually playing the card game, but in the actual anime it kind of starts off with them playing the card game, like you would see like Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Masters where the monsters are summoned from the cards, but then it kind of transitions over to a world where the D-Spirits become actually real. So now these characters can actually summon the D-Spirits without having to use the cards or any type of technology that way.
Interesting. Like, I mean, obviously comparisons are going to come up, but obviously it's Digimon. There's a real world and a digital world in that series, and it sounds a little bit similar in this one, where it's a spiritual, a digital world, and like a real world as well. That's really fascinating. I didn't know any of that, and I can't wait to see what comes out of it. But what drives in that story? What, like, obviously you're going to have main characters and stuff like that. What drives it? Are they trying to? Is it like are they trying to fight tournaments like in a Dragon Ball Z type? Are they trying to become like collect all the D spirits? Is it like in a Pokemon or a Monster Rancher type thing? Like, what was it? What drives the core of the story in that way?
Yeah, without spoiling it, there's a couple different overarching themes in the story. Damien, which is the main character, is basically just trying to win prize money from the D-Spirits tournaments to help his family out. They're I would say a little lower than middle class, but working family, having issues paying certain bills and things like that. And then there's also members of his town and village that are going through hardships as well. So he's playing the D-Spirits game as a way to help his family and friends from escaping poverty. So that's one of them. But the overarching story is a tournament, and there's a bunch of different characters that are fighting for different reasons.
That sounds amazing. And obviously those sort of motivations are so much more valuable than, like, I want to be the best. Yu-Gi-Oh had characters who were trying to get money for eye surgeries and stuff like that. And obviously your main character, you said Damien was his name?
Yes, Damien. Mm-hmm.
So obviously that having that character, obviously trying to follow that path is something that's really admirable. And I love it because obviously it's something that's going to attract kids. Obviously the cards have resonated with kids of all ages, as I said in the intro. And I really think that that's super valuable. So let's unpack it just a little bit more. What is, like, so they're digital and they're spirits. So they're spirits just what they're called, or are they related to spirits? Because you're also using words like soul and stuff like that. That they used to be people. Like, how does that connect to the story?
Well, the word spirit is coming from because they were beings that kind of like once existed in physical form. And since they are trapped in the card and using the card game, it's like essence of who they were, their spirit. They're not actually like physical. So that's where the D spirit comes from.
Awesome. And you mentioned a couple of different stories you wanted to tell. And obviously you have a vast history with both animation and illustration. Like, what is the primary way you want to bring this story to the world?
Are you talking about as far as through animation? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. How do you want to tell the story? Was it like a manga style thing, like a comic book, or do you want to do an animated series?
Yeah, so actually we're definitely doing a manga that's in development. So that may or may not come out before that first episode. It just depends on how the production timeline is. But I definitely want the manga to be going on the same time as the anime is going on. So it'll be presented in different ways, the anime and the manga, but it still will be like the core storyline of what's going on. So I want it to be consumed both ways.
Okay, wow. I love that integration. Obviously, you're integrating all the things that, we all love growing up. The manga side of things, the animated side of things, the card game side of things all seem to like live in this harmonic sort of way to experience the brand. I love that. Now, obviously, the thing that has caught so many eyes about it from the basically the get-go is the art on these D-Spirits cards. It's so vibrant. We were talking before how it takes so much inspiration. There's different cards behind you, and they look a little bit different to what we originally saw when, for those who don't know, this game originally launched on Kickstarter last year and broke Kickstarter trading card game records for its time. It was an absolute uproarious response to it. And did you in those original cards, and possibly even these ones, are you drawing all the art?
Yeah, so in the original cards, that was my style of how I draw. Even in the Kickstarter cards, which included more cell shading and was a little bit more dynamic as compared to the sample cards, which are more static. So that style will still be portrayed in the anime because that's my style. But like, for example, like the cards behind me that'll be coming out in our base set, I just wanted to take just a different approach. I wanted to have our characters still envisioned, but done by different illustrators. So we have water color painters and people that are actually like more detailed with painting, some 3D artists as well. So just wanted to it still will keep the same aspects of all of our characters, but just showing them in a different light. So I think it's good to have both of those interpretations of them.
Well, I mean, I 100% agree. And the thing I think that really stuck in my memory when I look back on my childhood and personal experience with Pokemon cards and trading cards of this sort of ilk, I've got a couple up there, It really was the fact. One thing that really opened my eyes to what a trading card could be, because of the age I was the Pokemon cards. They didn't always look like the characters from the show. Sometimes they used stock art, but other times they were, either made out of clay or had all this vibrant, different ways of art styles. There was watercolors or silly like block, almost like abstract styled representations of them. And I love seeing that in these sort of games because it does bring that richness and diversity visually to the game.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think with cards and things like that, you have the opportunity to kind of step out the box. I mean, I feel like the anime is always going to be the anime. So that always is going to be the finite way to see the characters and how they look. But when you have moments like these, it's like, okay, you can experiment more and show them in a different light. And I think that's still appreciated. It's like, what Pikachu looks like, but that base set, the watercolor with the purple cheeks and stuff, that still is embedded in your brain as well.
Yeah, some of the most iconic images of Pokemon nowadays that I remember when I think back on them are those more out there ones. Like I remember, there was 3D art on Diglett and stuff like that, and Eevee looked like it was like a 2D cartoon. It was amazing back then.
Yeah. So that's what we'll be showing off with Dspirits as well, and hoping that we can create that same nostalgia that people will remember in years to come.
That's awesome. And I love, honestly, the reason that I'm so attracted to this project, there is, I'm sure it's no secret to many people, there's a lot of trading card game projects out there at the moment that are, coming to the market, but this one really drives, because it really does capture that sort of sense, not only of nostalgic that we felt, but it also still feels like it's cemented and aimed at sort of that younger demographic. Like you sort of don't have any like really crazy adult themes or anything like that. Like I can see these characters in an anime being able to sit down and watch them at 11 years old and enjoy them the same way I did back with Pokemon the same way. Like if, when I have kids or whatever, I can share it with them as well.
Oh yeah, that's my major thing is families. With majority of my IPs, not even Dspirits. I think once we do start the anime, it is very storyline driven. So of course, still friendly to kids, so nothing like offensive or whatever. But it is something that when parents do sit down to watch it, or adults sit down to watch it, or teens watch it, they will realize that it is very compelling and deep story with a lot of different sprawling storylines.
Yeah, I'm so excited from what you've teased so far about just like the emotional journey that the characters go through. You said you grew up on storylines like Dragon Ball and Naruto and stuff like that, and they had such an emotional resonance, and adding that in to something that I feel like lacked it, like a Pokemon or something like that, I think is such a winning combination.
Like I said, one of my idols is Hayao Miyazaki.
Oh, right, yeah.
I always loved his movies because you leave with something, like it teaches something, or the characters have some extreme development that, towards the end of the movie, something has changed, So I think that's important, incorporating those lessons into stories and seeing characters start off one way and then building up to something by the end of, whatever series it is.
Yeah, there's such a richness to, for those who don't know, Miyazaki is a major creator at Studio Ghibli, which is the famous Japanese company that makes My Neighbor Totoro and all that sort of stuff. And there is such a beauty in the way that they blend emotion with fantasy in those. And I can already see from the way that you've handled your characters so far, obviously, we've only seen little bits here and there, but there's some Dspirits that express one emotion just by looking at them, and others that express such a different sort of emotion. Like, I mean, there's characters like Neffel who are mischievous, and then there's other characters that I've seen in some of the cards that look like they invoke such almost a sadness to their being,
Mm-hmm, that's true. Yeah, they all, I want to say, and we have minis coming up that'll showcase each Dspirit in animation, just like shorts, but those will definitely portray that like each individual spirit definitely has their own unique personality to them.
Okay, so this is okay. While we're talking about people having unique personalities, something I really didn't lock down before, and I should have when we were talking about story. Are these Dspirits in the story of the show? Are they individual, or is there multiple? Is there multiple Gaius and multiple Neffels and stuff like that, or is there only just one?
Some of them are multiple, some of them are one, and then some of them are multiples, but they're not like tons of them. Like an example would be a D-Spirit we have called Hood Rat. It's a play on words.
That pop culture coming in, yep.
Right, it's a play on words, but it's literally a rat with a hood on his head. Like those would be in, like you would see them like all over in alleyways. Those would be in multiples. But these spirits like Nephil, you wouldn't see multiple Nephils. It would only be one unless he decides to like clone himself or do some type of trick.
Okay, cool. So they sort of have like a sort of a legendary status in and of themselves. It's very fascinating in that way.
Yeah, they do.
So, well, this is probably a good time to bring this up. I mean, obviously there's so much diversity, not just in how the characters look and how they emote to you and how, the influences they draw on, be it Eastern culture, Western culture, anything like that. There's also a lot of diversity in what I've seen of the human characters as well. Something you don't see in a lot of these, monster catcher series that we saw way back when. There's a lot of, black characters, mixed race characters, Asian characters, white characters, all mixed in together. Is that something there's something conscious and super important to you to represent a whole diverse crowd of people?
Oh yeah, I think representation is very important. I don't think anyone should be excluded. Me personally, I've grew up around all types of different cultures: Indian, Russian, Brazilian, Black, white, just all types of people. It doesn't matter what we look like. We're all people at the end of the day. And I think that that's important, especially to a story like this. Damien, he is Black. We have Chaz, which is his best friend. He's Spanish. We have Sam, which is the girl who also accompanies them. She's Indian. And then Atlas, which is the antagonist, he is Asian and Caucasian. So we, plan to still do a lot of more different races and things. And I think that's authentic to how the real world is.
Well, that's what I wanted to call out and really praise you on. And it's a real way that I think that it will really help you resonate with the audiences. Like, I'm sure, obviously, I grew up with the luxury of thinking that Ash Ketchum was just another white guy like me. I didn't realize they were from Japan or anything like that, or any of the characters in Digimon where that was set in the real world. I didn't know until I said, this is Japan, that they were Japanese. But obviously, growing up like that, you were obviously experiencing the same thing and probably not noticing and not seeing a lot of that same representation. I love what the characters look like in Dspirits, and I love the way that you've represented the world as we see it now through that story so far.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think as a kid, you don't notice it, but I think as you do get older, you do start to notice like, hey, like I'm not being represented in this form of media. And then if I am being represented, it's not in the best way all the time. So I think media and entertainment does control the narrative, whether people want to it or not. And I think it's important to see different cultures and represented in a positive light as well.
I mean, I fully agree. And obviously, like you said, I don't know, because it felt like when I was watching the shows at the time, I was represented. But I would think that maybe you don't consciously as a kid know that you're not represented. But at the same time, it's just like, oh, this is somebody else's story that I'm moving on. You don't really embody that sort of same level. And obviously with you having so many diverse characters, you're going to be able to reach such a wide audience and have that emotional connection and people being able to see Dspirits as part of their own lives rather than, anything else.
Right. That's completely right.
Yeah. So, well, while we're talking about art as well, and we talked a little bit before, there's a huge difference between the way that the sample cards look and the way that the Kickstarter early cards look. There might be a picture on the screen if you're watching this on YouTube. The difference is the key difference I've noticed is they seem to be like sort of like a static sort of like, classic character design model on the Kickstarter. And now you've sort of imbibed them with so much, as people will be able to see behind you, so much movement, so much vibrance, so much shading. Is that something that's going to continue? Like, is that something that you really were conscious of trying to pursue?
Oh yeah, definitely. Even the Kickstarter cards as compared to our original sample cards are a lot different. The sample cards, I didn't have a lot of time to sit down and work on those characters. So that's why there's no shading on them. They're very static. That's just, I could just nail the design because I was working as a freelance animator at the time. So, and very busy and booked. So I did not have time spend as much time as I wanted to. The Kickstarter cards, I did have more time to spend on them, just because I allotted more months to working on them. And then the Soul Snatchers, which is our base set behind me, those were commissioned by different artists. So this time I had time to like really look for like some of the best artists I could find on social media to portray our characters with a lot more detail and action.
Yeah, they look amazing. I'm really impressed with the way that they've transitioned, because I followed the project since the Kickstarter, and I've just been absolutely blown away by the growth that and willingness to embrace such a new and vibrant art style. I love it. And as we were talking before, that sort of variance is really what's going to stick with different players and stuff like that. Now, the question I guess I have is, we didn't really cover it before when we were going over the background of the game, but are these characters that you sort of made on the side as you were animating, or how did sort of Dspirits itself sort of spring to life in your mind before it was on cards?
Yeah, well, Dspirits was a combination of two different projects I worked on earlier on. Dspirits itself, with I had a separate story that Neffel was in. I made that when I was in high school, probably around like the 10th or 11th grade. So that was more than 10 years ago. And then a little bit after I graduated, maybe a year, I had another project called Project War. And that's where Gayu, Mono, and a lot of the other characters came in. Because those are initially just going to be like an anime or t-shirt characters or video game characters. But then I took Dspirits and Project War, and I combined both of them to make the Dspirits that we have today.
Wow. And it looks like it's something that the game itself, obviously the characters have existed in your mind for years. And the game itself is something that you've been working on. When did you actually start putting sort of pen to paper on, like, okay, I want this to be not just trading cards or not just characters, but like a game as well. I want this to represent sort of like what Yu-Gi-Oh was to me, what Pokemon was to me.
Yeah, I want to say maybe around 2014, I would say, is when around 2014, that's when I started actually sitting down and writing on paper, like, this is the like mechanics of what I would want the trading card game to be for Dspirits.
Right. And was that the first time you'd ever tinkered with sort of game design? Like, obviously you're a very creative person and you've played in the creative space a lot, but in that sort of level of creativity, was that the first time you'd done it, or was there other projects you'd worked on? Had you wanted to be a game designer before?
No, that was the first one I did, and the only one I did. Just like I said, just from playing Yu-Gi-Oh and being aware of Pokemon to some extent, I just looked at them and like, certain things I don't like about it. So I feel like, okay, if I was to make a game, this is how I would make mine, and I would, change this, change that, add this, add that. So that's kind of like how I like formed it.
Well, let's break that down, because this show is very much about the way that these games play, obviously. So, you took a look at Yu-Gi-Oh and you used that sort of as a starting point. So talk me through sort of how you evolved the Yu-Gi-Oh system into what Dspirits has become, because the cards look... honestly, the cards look better than Yu-Gi-Oh cards. I'm sorry if anybody's going to hate me for that.
Well, I'm not saying that. You said it, not me.
That's right. You come at me. I mean, in a one-to-one analog, I mean, I'm not going to walk that back. That's a statement. You can put that on the next set's box. You can put that on there as a quote by me. Start some turf war. Okay, so what we were saying is, how did it go from this is going to be Yu-Gi-Oh is the foundation? How do I evolve that, no pun intended, into what I want? What did you take out? What did you put in? What were some of the things that you thought were weak in the Yu-Gi-Oh system?
It wouldn't be fair to Pokemon either, because I did actually set both of them as the base. There were things about each of them that I liked and disliked. I did like Pokemon, the health, the attack, and stuff like that. But one thing I never liked about Pokemon, which I never got into it, was I didn't like the energy cards. I didn't like the fact that I had to draw certain energy cards for the Pokemon to attack. So that was something I did not like. For Yu-Gi-Oh, what did I like about it? I didn't like the fact that it was very luck-based. It was very luck-based. It was very money-based, as far as like you have to literally be able to buy and assemble like whatever deck is relevant at the time to even stand a chance competitively. And I want to say and maybe those were the main things I didn't like about it. I did like the retreat system in Pokemon. So we do have something called Soul Exchange, which works similar, but works a lot different. than that. But like I said, because I didn't like the luck-based system, I thought right away that if we created two decks for these spirits, the deck for the spirits and the deck for the signal and signs card, which are like our support cards or magic cards, those right away would give the player more choices, so they wouldn't have to rely much on drawing to be able to turn battles in their favor.
Well, I mean, there's a couple of mechanics there that you've said that really sort of blew my mind. Obviously, both both Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! Use that single deck, and you've decided to split them so that, for those who don't know, you can choose whether during your draw step, if you want to draw what essentially in Yu-Gi-Oh! Would turn out to be like, I guess, a trap or a magic card, and then the other one would be like a creature card. So it's like, do I need more creatures or do I need some sort of Hail Mary, effect in the game or something like that? And I really do think that that's It's been done in a few different games before, but I do think that that is a vibrant way to mitigate that luck factor that you do see. Like, and especially in Yu-Gi-Oh! For some years, there was always that if you drew the best hand first against somebody else, you would ultimately end up winning, especially in that pay-to-play model. So speaking of pay-to-play, how have you called it out there? You know, you didn't like the fact that some of the rarest cards were the only ones that were really tournament viable. How has Dspirits combated that?
Yeah, so I took my time really trying to balance the cards to the best of my ability, meaning that a lot of the Dspirits that don't have the highest stats in reference to like attack and defense, they have very good abilities and they're able to cripple the stronger Dspirits or take them out completely. And then some of our more rare Dspirits that have higher stats, they have more cost to be played and their abilities aren't the best, but it's essential almost to use both because you can't really take your opponent out using a bunch of low level Dspirits. But you also can't use so many high-powered Dspirits because you're going to be, paying high costs to use them. So I felt like having both would really balance out the game and balance out players' decks.
Well, yeah, I mean, to use the Yu-Gi-Oh! Analogy, even a lowly man-eater bug could take out a Blue Eyes White Dragon back in the days when I was playing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't think I could ever use a man-eater bug today. There's so many different things that could be summoned.
Good bug type, though.
Yeah. It was during the time, though, that was the one of the cards to have.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think having cards that pretty much all have that same type of utility, it really creates a way that, that there's no throwaways. I didn't want people to open a pack of cards, get Dspirits, and not be able to effectively use them in battle.
Yeah. Now, speaking of battle, and you sort of mentioned it in there, the higher powerful cards, your bigger, more higher number cards, 5,000, 3,000 attack or whatever it is, they come with a higher cost, you sort of mentioned. Explain to me how that system works, because it's actually really quite unique how the costs on the cards work. I think it's something that's maybe, if not a little bit unique to this game. So tell me about how SP works when it comes to your Dspirit.
Yeah, so that's definitely unique to our game. A big theme of our game also is cost management. So your SP spirit points kind of work as your life points. So you start off with 5,000 of those, but every time you play a Dspirit, when it's destroyed by battle on the field, you have to pay whatever their costs are. So I don't know if it's kind of reversed on my screen, but each Spirit has like an SP count at the top. So once they're removed from the field by battle, their SP gets subtracted from your SP. And once you are left with 0, you lose the game.
That's really interesting. So a lot of games I've seen in past and present use a system where, if I'm going to play a creature and I have to pay, some sort of life point type total, that immediately comes off my life. So if I'm at 2 life, I can't, or, 2,000 life, I can't pay a 4,000 creature because that would instantly wipe me out. But in this case, if you're at 100 life and you still have a 500 creature, you're still in the game, or 5,000 creature, I should say. You're still in the game because you can plop that down. However, if somebody, man-eater bugs it, you're out of the game anyway, right?
It had to be destroyed by battle, not by card effect.
Oh, right. Okay, that's interesting. But all right. Okay, so it's almost like a breakthrough sort of damage, but reversed. You're doing extra damage. You're doing the extra damage that the attack points are off of you. It's an interesting system. I can't wait to really dig into it once the game is widely available.
Oh yeah, like I said, that's just another another key thing in the game that you unlock, because it's like not only are you concerned about, what D-Spirits will do the most damage, but you're also being concerned about your SP management. Even when you play certain cards, it costs SP to play them. So it is another strategic part of the game.
It's really fascinating. Now, speaking of strategic parts of the game, there is something I've seen you like listed on the rule book and stuff like that. And I don't want anybody to get too worried because this term has a little bit of a bit of a meaning in trading card games, but there's game breaking effects, which don't actually mean that you break the game, but you get to break the rules in a sense. Tell me about those and what that means for gameplay.
Oh yeah, that's very significant to our game, and I feel like another unique aspect. So I call them game breaking because usually in a card game, those would be game breaking rules. Right now, I believe we have three. We have you can pay extra spirit points to draw an additional card on your turn. We have the ability that if a D-Spirit has been on the field for at least one turn, or if they've been super desummoned, you can do a soul exchange. So you can actually basically retreat a D-Spirit off the field back to your hand and summon a different one in its place. And that's a very unique strategic strategy that I've seen players use, and I love watching it and seeing that being done. And then our last game break, which I haven't seen used quite yet, is that if you run out of D-Spirits, normally you would lose the game. But if you pay half of your spirit points, whatever, even if you have 4,000 or even if you have 100 spirit points, if you pay half of them, you can take your D-Spirits from the D world, which is like our graveyard, and then put them back into your deck and shuffle them and continue playing.
It's really fascinating to have these sort of like almost constant effects that you can use. It's a really interesting thing. And you said something there that really caught my ear. You said we have 3 so far. So you as the game designer, are you open to adding more?
Oh yeah, our of course our game rule booklets, those kind of like are standalones, but on the website, as things continue, we always have the ability to go into the website and add new rules to them.
It's fascinating to think about that, and as the game evolves, because obviously something about these sort of growing trading card games and expandable games and modular games is the idea that sometimes certain things come into the game, like you mentioned power creep before, things like that sort of happen where you have to sort of have certain cards just to make sure that you're not affected by these other overpowered cards. So, I mean, down the track, if there's something that appropriate, you could add one of these game-breaking rules that sort of mitigates any sort of, less than optimal gameplay experience. It's actually a really interesting sort of model to have, that you've got this fluid rule set.
Yeah, I agree. That's definitely one of the things that we can do. I would like to do card ruling, so we go into depth, and if things do need to be, altered that way. But like you said, we do have the game breaker rule, so that going forward in the future, if something does seem a little overpowered, we can just go in there and grant players a new ability to have in the game.
I'm really excited to see how that evolves, because again, it seems like something that's relatively unique. Very rarely, as a historian of collectible games or whatever, it is very rarely that the rule set itself is fluid. Usually that's locked. In the way that companies deal with this is they'll introduce new cards that players again have to get. But you've got this sort of, other games have sort of introduced certain rules and stuff as the game has evolved, but not something so blunt where it's like, these are your options this time. Would you also be open to taking one of those away as well? Is it like fully fluid?
I would. I think if I want to analyze the game as it continues, so if it is something to where it's like the meta or the players are saying like, hey, like a majority of them are saying like this needs to be checked or whatever, then that would be something I would take into account and would fix.
Absolutely. Well, I guess, having open again, I'm a long-time trading card game player, and just things that come to mind. It's like, oh, if you can shuffle your deck so you don't lose and you play a life gain strategy, you can mitigate that and just constantly just a battle of attrition, right? So maybe, there's other things that would impact that if certain cards allowed, right? So it's just fascinating that you've approached it with this sort of fresh model, especially considering things like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, such static games for the most part with a basis. So you've really added a lot of creativity to the game engine. I love that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I wanted to give a lot of control to the people that are playing in the battle so that they feel like they have options. You know, if they really can memorize what the cards do and really can think like 2 steps ahead, then I feel like people who can think strategically should be rewarded for that.
I'm definitely going to be excited to see how the top tier players, once they start to get their hands on cards, start to use this system in such an interesting way. Now, you did mention there sort of playing cards and memorizing cards and stuff like that. Now, I believe that's because you mentioned 2 decks before, the deck for support cards and the decks for creatures, but you actually have a third deck in the game that's called a side deck. Now, traditionally in trading card games, side decks aren't involved in the game itself. They're sort of off to the side, and between best of 3 rounds, you can sort of exchange cards between the two. But that wasn't your approach to your side deck. Tell me about that.
Oh yeah, I think that that's another unique concept we have as well. So you can still utilize a side deck in that sense to exchange cards between battle, but for our rules, like in the squad deck, you can only have 1 of each D Spirit. So I thought it would be very interesting to utilize a side deck to be able to summon more copies of D Spirits that you have in your deck already, or some that you don't have in your deck at all. And either way, you're only allowed 20 in your deck. So I thought it would be cool to have that option to where you can utilize more than the 20. We have cards that you can actually draw from your side deck. And then we have cards that can actually be summoned from your side deck. And I just think that opens another layer and more strategy for the gameplay.
Yeah, it sort of echoes a little bit, again, we're talking about mechanical inspiration. It echoes that Yu-Gi-Oh! Sort of what started when I played was a fusion deck, became known as the extra deck, and all these other effects could come out of it and stuff like that. And I think that that adds a richness as well to the game. I cannot wait to see how this game works.
Oh yeah, I think it keeps it fresh and will keep players on their toes. But then again, like I said, it rewards you if you know what you're doing. Someone who wouldn't memorize all their cards wouldn't be able to utilize their side deck because they wouldn't even know what cards could be summoned from there.
Now, I probably should just take this moment because I've just remembered, I will link it in the description of either the podcast version or the YouTube version. But if you want to learn how to play and see some of Sterling's animation, there is actually a gorgeous little animation that teaches you, using the characters in the game, how to play and what the basics are. Check that out. It's so great. It uses Sterling's animation and it sort of gives you an idea of what the game will look like down the track. Like, obviously, it uses the Kickstarter cards.
You use the sample cards. The sample cards.
Yeah, they use the sample cards. Yes, you're right. Sorry, I misspoke there. Yeah, they use the sample cards. Thank you very much. That we talked about earlier. So we'll get a chance to see those as well. So be sure to check that little animation out. Now, Sterling, we've talked about 3 different decks, but we haven't talked about one of my favorite things about trading card games, and that's deck building. How does deck building work? You sort of touched on it there. You're only allowed 1 of every B Spirit? Is that what you said?
That's correct.
And then in the other deck is the utility deck. Does that have a limit in and of itself?
So each individual signal and signs card or support card actually has a limit on them. So it lets you know how many you can put in your deck.
Oh, right. So there's no like general rule for signal and signs cards. That's fascinating. But there's no limit on cards at all for the side deck.
There isn't. We are updating the rule set so that the signal and signs that limit on them still incorporates the side deck. Before we didn't have limit on those cards, they were just like 2 per deck. But after seeing some gameplay and seeing how some of them are utilized, definitely a limit on them needs to be placed, even with including the side deck.
Awesome. So we talked about decks. We've talked about how you deck build, and I love the idea. I mean, if it's purely like this, I love the idea of 1 of every D Spirit being sort of a play set, so to speak. Like, one of the things I didn't like about Yu-Gi-Oh! Or I didn't love as much about Pokemon or something like that is as a poor kid who grew up with not a lot of disposable income for this sort of thing, having to get 4 copies in the case of Pokemon or 3 copies of a rare card was something that I didn't love about trying to stay competitive with the game.
Yeah, there's different reasons why I did that. I think that just as a balance check, if anything was like too crazy, I didn't want it to be like multiple copies of that specific card. And then we also have the detective cards. So we have like Damien's versions of his D Spirits, Atlas's versions of his D Spirits. So that's a way around our rule if you did want to use 2 of the same D Spirit. But those cards actually have different abilities and different stats as well. So they're not the exact same card.
Oh, right. So that sort of reminds me of in the earliest days, I'm not sure if you'll remember, but the earliest days of the Pokemon trading card game, they had like Team Rocket's Rattata and, you know, Misty's Psyduck or whatever. And it was 4 copies of that, and you could have 4 copies of, you know, regular Psyduck or whatever. It was distinctly different cards.
Yeah, it's kind of like that same type of feel.
That's awesome. So you've obviously, you know, come up with a ton of stuff. How... there is one other thing I do want to talk about before what I want to talk about just then. Is signals and signs. You briefly just mentioned them, and you briefly mentioned sort of card types. So just go over the card types quickly. There's D-Spirits, yep, which are just like your creatures. And then there's signals and signs, which is your support cards. Now, are signals and signs 2 different card types?
There's the same card. It's just called signal and signs.
Oh, okay. Right. So there's no different, like, it's, so that's just the card name, the 2 words together.
Right.
Okay. All right. Sorry. No, I got confused there. I thought maybe signs were a specific type of card and signals were a specific type of card, and they function differently, like traps and spell cards. But that's not the case. And is there any other card type?
Yeah. So during the Kickstarter, we introduced 2 more card types. We have special moves, which are support cards or support cards that get triggered when the corresponding D-Spirits are on your side of the field. But those cost SP or cost some type of cost to be played. And then we have realm cards, which are kind of like our field cards. So that when they're played on the battlefield, they affect the whole field, and they give extra effects or stat boosts or stat decreases to certain D-Spirit types on the field. And to play those cards, you have to bid spirit points against your opponent to be able to play them.
You have to bid spirit points against your opponent to have to... So you have to... Okay, this is interesting. You have to give up life points. You and your opponent have to go back and forth about how many life points, spirit points, sorry, you have to exchange before you play one. That's the cost to play the card?
So to better explain it, like it will say one costs 100 spirit points. That's the starting. So you can say, I want to play a realm card for 100 life points. But if your opponent wants to negate that, they can say, okay, well, I'll pay 200 or 300 to negate that. So you kind of go back and forth until either one pays more to negate it or one pays more to actually play it.
That's fascinating. That adds like a bluff element that I'm absolutely just enraptured by. Again, that's only excited me more. I did not realize that was a rule. That's so fantastic. Now, all of this, you sort of alluded to it before, that you had adjusted things and you were aware that there was sort of, a big word in trading card games. And obviously it's something that's super important, is balance, that sort of term. How did you go about sort of play testing all of these things that D-Spirits encompasses? There's so much going on in a game. Even though the cards look very simple and very easy to sort of understand, there seems to be a lot going on when you're throwing game breakers and these bidding rules and stuff like that. How did you go about playtesting? Did you have playtest groups, or what was the situation there?
Yeah, so a wonderful group called the Storm Podcast, they really embraced and showed love to D-Spirits during when I first printed the first sample cards. And it was like, I want to say a group of 5 of them or 6 or more. And they spent hours upon hours playing the card game with the actual cards. So I was able to get a lot of great feedback from them and the other players as well that were playing with the sample cards. And that's kind of like what I incorporated into like trying to edit their abilities and just making sure that none of the D-Spirits were too overpowering.
Right. Okay. That's really interesting. I'm glad that you had that sort of feedback and back and forth between being able to sort of alter and edit. Do you remember anything major that you had to change? Like anything that you were just like, oh no, this can't stay in the final game?
Oh yeah. Up until then and now, one of our cards, Thug Sludge, has to be. I think I did edit him already, but he definitely will stay edited because he could be summoned from the side deck, D World, or deck, and he's like a board wiper, so he wipes certain types off the field. It was very overpowering, and he gains stats as well. So he had to be edited. Greediness is a card that's kind of like our Pot of Greed, where you draw 2 cards. I guess making it, I didn't realize how overpowering that can be, drawing multiple cards, but it really is. So currently we have a limit of 4 for that card, but it's definitely going to be changed to probably one, to be honest. And I want to say what else. And then we have a D-Spirit called Momo-chan, which is based off of Momo from American Horror, Creepypasta, whatever. So that card can be summoned when your opponent has the max amount of D-Spirits they're allowed to have on the field. It wipes the board, and you can still attack that turn. So that's something that has to be edited as well.
Okay, right. So it's still a little bit of a work in progress. I saw that recently you actually had a bit of an exhibition tournament and stuff like that. Did you notice these sort of things while you were doing that? What was it called? Winter Cup, maybe?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like I said, the greediness card was one that I witnessed firsthand during the tournament that definitely needed to be changed, because somebody who would just be starting to play the game and versus someone who's using that card and knows what they're doing, it's just very overwhelming to be going up against, like an extra like six cards almost.
Right. Well, it's now that the cards are getting out there, people are receiving some of the earliest product that you've released. And people are going to be starting playing more. Do you have a channel for people to offer sort of feedback or anything like that, if they notice things, especially now that it's out in the world? Because one of the things is, people will immediately start finding ways to, break the game, not game breakers, but break the game in the sort of TCG parlance.
Right, trying to find some loopholes. Yeah, we have the Discord, the Dspirits Discord, which I believe the link is on our Dspirits dash online website. They can go on there. The Discord, even though I'm not on there 24/7, I am on the Discord frequently, and that's the best way for me or any members of the Dspirits team to be able to get feedback about the game. So I encourage people that actually play the Dspirits card game to go on there. We have a gameplay section under our Discord, and that's really for people to leave, whatever criticisms or positive feedback or negative feedback that they have about the game that they will, potentially like to see altered.
Well, this sounds like time for my favorite catchphrase. It'll be linked in the description.
Yeah, please go on there.
Yeah. So, well, I'll send people that way. The other thing I do want to ask, because obviously as games like this, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is notorious for it. Pokemon has to do it a little less frequently. They have to ban cards or change cards when they are deemed outright overpowered. You mentioned that greediness has I guess a printed cost of 4. How do you go about dealing with cards between set releases and stuff like that? Do you want to have like a banned and restricted list like Yu-Gi-Oh! Does? Do you want to issue a statement that says, no, this card doesn't say 4 anymore, it says 1 instead now, and in official tournaments, that's the way it's to be played? What's your approach to overpowered sort of game warping cards?
Yeah, there's a couple of different ways. I really don't want to ban them because I love them so much. And I do feel like people love whatever character it is as well. I think that because we are in the age of social media and internet, those things should be utilized. So I'd rather do like a card ruling and be like, hey, until we get the edited text, if we ever make one of this specific card, this is the limit, or this is the new way that this card has to be played. Now, if you're playing with your friends, that's, one thing. But if you're going into official tournaments or playing in standard play, then whatever those rules are on the side, on the side have to be recognized by whoever's playing.
That's a good point. And obviously, that's something that trading card game players are starting to get used to. I feel like that's something that it's a challenging thing to have to do, but obviously everybody's got to be aware of it if they're playing in sanctioned tournaments and stuff like that. And it's something that's been the bane of existence for a long time for physical trading card games. Now, I do want to just speak to that. Obviously, there's things that can mitigate these sort of problems coming up, and I'm not saying that that's the sort of thing that will happen with this game. Please trust me there. But you mentioned before that, you were the only person who designed the game initially. I mentioned it in the introduction, you're a TCG triple threat, and you've brought on, you did all the art for the first set, you did all the design. Now you've brought on a slew of other artists to help with this Kickstarter set, and I assume the base set, the first actual official set. Are you going to look at hiring what some trading card game companies call research and development or R&D to sort of help shape and mold the game further as well? Or is that something you want to keep in your hands?
Oh, yeah. No, I definitely want to expand. As we grow, I want the game and company to grow at scale. So that already is something that I've actively have done for the first edition base set. Had reviews and just more detailed looks on the game and all of our cards and abilities, so that anything that may seem overpowered or the wording isn't correct, we're going to change probably like 95% of our cards for the base set coming out.
Okay, wow. All right. Well, obviously, you know, you've got to like redo templating for the wording and stuff like that. Obviously, things slightly change if you're going to be altering the rule book and stuff. Do you think that you'll have or set up? I know a lot of trading card game players, especially highly engaged ones, love to get involved in, you know, public or beta playtest programs, you know, where they get sent preview cards of upcoming cards or, you know, new cards that they get to play test, you know, cut out from a printer sheet or whatever and cut out and play test and stuff and give feedback on there before the cards are actually created.
I can't say if that's something I'm going to do. I have to be honest. I do want to, I am or want to do that with a select group, but I don't know if it will be with players from the actual Dspirits community.
Right, right. Well, I mean, I know a lot of trading card games tend to lean on their, you know, high level players and stuff like that from tournaments and everything. So obviously, you know, eventually, if you have enough tournaments, they're going to come to you.
I think that that makes more sense. I feel like there's a select group out of that I can trust. I'm very huge on spoiling and leaks, so there's ways around it by not having, you know, characters' names and things like that, or the illustrations. But I do want to be very careful when it comes to things like that.
So spoilers and leaks is something you're very afraid of. God, you're gonna hate my next topic, which is the future.
I can talk about it a little bit.
Okay, well, we'll see how far. We'll see if we can push up against it. What you want us to be able to see on the horizon. So obviously, what are your plans? Obviously, Dspirits is a thing. It's happened. It's coming. It's, you know, it's unstoppable. And as more people find it, I'm sure it's only going to continue to grow and scale, as you said, exponentially. What are your current plans? Like, are you going to have expansions in the same fashion that, say, something like Yu-Gi-Oh and Pokemon do? Is there going to be just one base set a year? Tell me all about what your plans for the expansions beyond base set are.
Yes, I think my whole idea with it and my plan, to be honest, is that I want to make sure that with each set that we pull out is quality. I don't want to just be rushing and just pumping them out there just to do it. Of course, as we grow, we have more artists, and that, you know, it's an easier thing to accomplish. But I do want to make sure that, you know, things are balanced and things are great quality. I also think my priority over everything is I really want people to be familiar with all the characters that we have to offer at first and really fall in love with them. I think that's very important versus introducing like 100 or so dozen characters every year. I really want people to really, you know the characters that I've spent so much time already creating. So that's not to say that we don't have sets already planned. I have sets planned upwards to 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 more years. But I definitely want people to get familiar with the characters we have and generate a bond with them through the card game and through anime and you know, other forms of media that we decide to do.
That's awesome, and I can't wait to see how you know, your talents in other fields wrap around this game and sort of help all those elements or verticals sort of come together. Like, I'm really excited. And having said that, would you envision that if you're going to be launching a series and a manga and the trading card games happening at the same time, would you expect, as a trading card game player and somebody who is designing one, that the expansion sets would reflect themes or elements of that story?
I think that that's just a no-brainer and a beautiful thing about having the brand represented in different media, because it's just like whenever we have the opportunity to introduce new characters or new things to the game, we can introduce that in the animation, in the manga as well. So it kind of just all coincides in every form that we decide to enter, lift each other up.
Okay, I'm really excited to see the evolution of all those three things sort of converge as they sort of keep going on, and you know, things like, you know, you and I probably experienced it with Yu-Gi-Oh! When it went to GX, all the cards went to GX and all that sort of stuff. I'm very excited for that sort of thing. I guess lastly, on this sort of expansion topic and talking about, what your vision for everything is, you said you have ideas for 20, 30, 40 years. Like, what's your approach to things like expansion rotation and like legality as far as tournament play? Will things from base set always be forever available? Will they be reprinted? Like, what's your approach there? Because I know things that certain trading card games that have sort of legacy formats where you can play things from the first set become very challenging if you can't get the cards that are good in play.
I definitely want every card from base set to be continued to be used, because going forward, not every D Spirit that's in this set might pop up in the next set, or it's not going to even if they do this, they might not have the same ability or same stats or whatever. So I do want that. I mean, I feel like people have collected the cards. And I would feel some type of way, and I'm sure they would if they would find out that they wouldn't be able to use those cards. Now, if we do certain formats to where certain sets are allowed, only the future knows. But I don't want to just cancel them out completely.
So that sort of wraps up my general questions about gameplay. I really wanted to tackle that because I know it's not something that I've seen a lot of conversation about, but I'm so excited to play D-Spirits and actually experience, having my own D squad and super D summoning and soul exchanging, and all of it sounds so exciting. So I really wanted to highlight that. There is a couple other things that I think it would be valuable for newcomers to the game to know, and we can just rapid fire through them. So some obvious questions come to mind. Obviously, it's a collectible game. It's a game that has structures of availability through rarity and card packs. Like, how does D-Spirit structure its rarity?
Well, right now with the rarity, what we are doing and what I have been wanting to do, of course, we have like dark rares, which have more selective rarity than our regular hollow rares. But right now, all the hollow rares have the same amount of rarity, but because I want to say there's is it 80 plus of them or 70 plus of them, because it's so many rares, it's still hard to pull the specific one that you might be looking for, because you're competing up against 80 something different cards.
Right. And what's a booster pack look like in that sense? Is one of those rares in every booster pack, or what's the structure of a booster pack?
Yeah, so you do get 8 common or uncommon D-Spirits, non-hollow. You'll get 2 Signal and Signs cards, which are support cards. And then your last card would be a hollow. So for our hollows for the Kickstarter set, we have hollow D-Spirits. We have 3 different holographic Signal and Signs cards. We have holographic realm cards as well. And then we have the dark rare cards, which are like alternate versions of our D-Spirits, but they're have usually stronger stats or abilities, but they also have higher costs to be played as well. So I'm gonna say four different
tiers.
Cards. Yes, 4 different tiers to pull.
Okay, so just really quickly, I don't want to spend too much longer on this, but the dark rares have different stats. Do they have a different name? Are they exclusively deck building playable with their counterparts that aren't dark rares?
So they do have the same name. So you can't play both. You have to choose if you want to do the regular D-Spirit or if you want to do the dark rare version of it.
Fascinating. I'm so excited to see how all of this converges into this game. I'm super excited. Now, obviously a big question at the moment, as we mentioned earlier, it's a competitive space at the moment. Trading card games are going through a renaissance of sorts. People have called it, some people call it a gold rush. There's a lot of differing opinions either way, but I want to know, what are your plans to sort of market D-Spirits in this competitive space? Just what big picture stuff?
My goal is to make D-Spirits a household name. So any marketing plans that we will be doing this year that will be seen very soon is in relation to that. So with that being said, I think that will make the collection base even stronger, because the more people that know about it, the more people want to play the game, and the more people want to play and collect the cards. And I think that expands from just people who just play TCGs. Like I said earlier, the group I mentioned, the Storm Podcast, that consisted of a group of fellows who didn't even play trading cards, but they saw Dspirits and fell in love with it. So that's more so of the audience that, you know, I want to reach as well, in combination to people who already play, because that's at the end of the day what's going to make our brand grow stronger and bigger.
Well, I mean, I think that's one of the most valuable things you can do in this time. You know, you want to try and capture people who aren't already focused on the TCG world, right? And I think that, as we said, to refer back to earlier in the episode, you know, it is such a valuable thing that your characters are so immediately resonant. You know, they immediately invoke things, whether it's Hood Rat or the Basket Brawler or whatnot. You know what this is based on. Whether it's Momo-chan, you know what this is based on. Or, you know, a slice of pizza, like you said. You know, you love your food type Dspirits and stuff like that. You know, I'm sure there are other people who do. My first goal, like your bugs in Yu-Gi-Oh, is going to be to make a food type deck. I don't care if it's competitive. I'll show up at the closest tournament.
I've gotten that. I've had someone, when we were selling the samples of singles on the website, they bought like 6 or 8 different knuckle slices because they just said that they love pizza. So I don't even know if they even play, you know, the Dspirits game, but they just love pizza, so they wanted to buy the pizza Dspirit. So
because everybody knows you need 8 slices to make a pie. I guess that begs the question. You know, I mentioned that I would willingly play a disastrous or even maybe fantastic, who knows how the meta shakes out, food deck in organized play. Quickly, what are your plans for your organized play, and what do you envision Dspirits as at the highest level of organized play?
Yeah, so I'm really working hard with our distributors that, you know, of course, are working with the local game stores to come up with a public and finite plan for the local for the organized play. I mean, so I know off the bat I do want to offer special cards to players who do come in and play organized play and win, so that, you know, those cards aren't normally something you would get from our website or, you know, be bought online. So that's pretty much all I can say about it. I don't really want to talk much about it until like we kind of really get together and really iron it out to you know, something that I can announce, but that is something that is very important to me.
Well, this sort of almost is a semi-plug, but I need to know for the audience, because I mean, if I was listening to this, I would be so excited. I already am so excited, but another version of myself would be so excited to try and get my hands on Dspirits. So tell me, how is Dspirits going to be available initially? Obviously, you had a Kickstarter, but all that product was for Kickstarter backers and stuff like that. How you know, the public going to discover Dspirits first and foremost? Is it a local game store thing? Are you guys selling it directly? Tell me all about that.
Yeah, so the Control the Soul, which is the Kickstarter, I have the box right here. That actually was right. That was actually of course I went to the pledges, but we also were blessed to have the opportunity to have that with some distributors as well. So we have Geek Culture over in New Zealand, Prince Distribution in Canada, Channel Fireball that's over in the US, and then All Stars Sports Cards, which is the LGS located in Texas. They all are selling our Dspirits Kickstarter product. So if you go into any of those stores where, you know, they've distributed to, you'll be able to play it there. And then for the Soul Snatchers, which is our base set, we will be selling it on our website, you know, first. So you have the full reign to get it from there. But then after that, you know, will be sold by local game stores, and we're trying to spread it out as much as possible. And that goes with our marketing plan, bringing more awareness to what Dspirits is, so that, you know, you'll have more people to play with, and it'll hopefully be in stores everywhere.
That is amazing to hear, and I am just blown away how internationally influential the brand has been. With only, it's not even out yet, and you're already in stores internationally. In, you know, places like New Zealand are a hot name for trading card games at the moment, and you've already got a presence there. Unbelievable. And honestly, that sounds like you've beaten out many other competitors who are coming up in this sort of, you know, Renaissance era.
Yeah, I think we're not in like the old days where the internet doesn't exist. It's important to, everybody is connected to some extent, you know, with social media and things like that. And you're no longer limited to just like saying like, hey, I just want to have it in US. You know, the internet creates that portal to where you can talk to people in Germany, in Africa, in Canada, in New Zealand, you're everywhere. So anywhere that, you know, these spirits can readily be available at, I want it to be there.
That's fantastic. And like I said, it comes back to that diversity piece as well, because people from all over the world are going to be able to see themselves, not just in the game and not just relate to the pop culture that the game represents, but also the characters in the anime and the manga and stuff like that. As much as I can't wait to get my hands on the game, I can't wait to see how you let the lore and the brand evolve. And it honestly sounds like it's groundwork that you've been doing for years. You know, we talked about it in the introduction. You had other super family friendly, super endearing, unrelentingly optimistic characters. And I cannot be more earnest when I say I think that the world needs more characters like that nowadays.
Oh yeah, I'm big on spreading light, positivity, love, and I think we need that. I think the world continually needs that, so that it can keep turning and keep thriving.
That's fantastic. Well, I hope that the world, people around the world are brought together, and one day we see, you know, speaking to plans about the highest level of D-Spirits organized play and world championship, where people who might be using different language D-Spirit cards, you know, in different languages and all that sort of stuff, but they're playing at the same table together.
Oh yeah, I definitely said from the beginning, if someone, you know, would really sit down to take the time to really learn how to play the game and play on a competitive level, that I feel like they should make a living off of that. So I can't wait to the day where we do like a worldwide tournament and the cash prize is like $1 million or more or something like that. I'm looking forward to those days.
$1 million cash prize. You heard it here first, right? Start trading those D-Spirits. So for my final question for the sort of core part of the interview, I really like to reflect on lessons. Now, it's hard, you know, obviously you're only just coming to market now with a Kickstarter product and everything like that, but the trading card game space has changed so much since you started back in 2014. In 2014, trading card games were almost seen on the out, you know, even as much as 2019, when you sort of started going public with sample cards and stuff like that, the trading card game space shifted so much. What are some of the things that you weren't expecting and had to learn on the fly? And what are some of the things that, you know, you learned from your first couple of years in the trading card game space?
That's a very good question. What can I say I've learned so quickly? One thing that I did learn very quickly, okay, so when I did the samples, like I said, I just was starting, just building. I didn't like have an exact count of this or that or what the print runs and all this stuff were. So as the game actually got, you know, some popularity and people were asking like, hey, how much of this was printed or how much, I'm like, I don't know. Like, I didn't even think that many people would be playing this, you know? So I definitely learned that to just keep a record of certain things. Not always saying that we're going to announce every single last thing, but I think it is important to let collectors and players have an idea of how rare or how limited some things are.
Okay. I do want to circle back to that. So with that being the biggest sort of one of the bigger lessons that you learned coming into the space, and was that one of the things that you were expecting the least? Like, was there anything that's caught you off guard that you're like, I thought trading card games were like this, but now that I'm behind the curtain, you know, that I'm on the other side of the counter, so to speak, what is it that you've learned that you're like, oh, this is how this is supposed to work?
About the game, not anything too much. I think I learned a lot about it from maybe a business aspect, I want to say. Just learning how things work, how people that view the cards that might not necessarily be like the actual players of the game. I think those were things I wasn't expecting, because that's not what I kind of like set out to do when I made the game. So those were learning curves. Learning people. I've always, even before I did animation, I worked as a waiter for years and worked in customer service. So I think always doing something new and learning how people react or how they treat certain news or things like that. I think those are definitely important lessons to learn as you conduct any IP, business wise.
Okay, so last core question then. I mean, now you've learned so much, you've taken on so much. I mean, 2 years, everybody says that COVID feels like it's either been a couple of months since COVID hit or, a couple of decades since COVID hit. It feels like time doesn't really exist in the same way that it had before COVID hit. Tell me, going forward into the next year, the next 2 years, what is the one thing that you're going to take away from your experience so far and change about, whether it's the way you handle these spirits or whatever, going into the future?
Knowing that I can't please everyone. I think
so valuable in creative spaces.
Yes, I think creators or leaders, whatever, can be in hard positions because, well, I know at least for me, you want to please everybody. I don't want to go to sleep or whatever, knowing that, someone was unhappy with a product they received or something that I made. But I also realized that no matter what you do, you can come into the room on a handstand with flowers on your feet or something. everyone is not going to be impressed by that. They might be like, what is he doing? Some people might like it. Some people might be like, So I think it's just relentlessly sticking with your first mind. Of course, listening to advice or whatever input on the way, but it's kind of like soaking in all those things in, but still keeping the train moving forward to where that you don't stop, and you ultimately reach the destination that you want to head towards.
I'm so glad to hear that. And it sounds like you've taken on so much these last couple of years. I'm really excited to see what the next couple of years brings for it. Okay, well, that sort of wraps it up for my core questions. I did reach out to my audience on YouTube and on Twitter and on Discord over the last few months since we were sort of putting this together and asking if there was anything that they really wanted to hear you speak to or anything like that. I'm just going to throw just a couple quick questions at you. We don't have to spend too long on it. Some questions came up from retailers and stuff like that. Is the Dspirits packaging that came from the Kickstarter, is that going to be something that is more... that is going to be a norm, like that special two-piece box? Is that going to be what Dspirits is shipped in all the time? For those who don't know, we would have seen it if you're watching on YouTube, when Sterling held it up before. It's a little bit different to a traditional booster box. Is that the way you can expect to see them in the future?
The quality, yes. I want to maintain the same level of pristine quality and not present it like as a typical card booster box. I want to keep thinking out the box and reinventing the wheel. As far as the same exact presentation, no, I want to change it up and have it presented in different ways. But like I said, always maintain a superior quality.
Well, something I saw that was super unique to those boxes as well, not to speak to specifically the packaging, but to speak to something that you decided to do that I thought was really innovative, is you put a rule book in the booster box. So somebody doesn't have to go out and buy a starter set. They can just start playing immediately from the booster box that they buy.
Oh, yeah, because I think that no matter if you buy the starter deck or if you buy the box, you need to know how to play. So even though we have the website, I just still didn't feel like, it wouldn't do a disservice to have the actual, rules included, because you'll be able to make a deck or a couple of decks off of the booster box.
Yeah. I mean, I think that that's so ingenious. And I can't believe after 29 years almost of trading card game history, that has only happened a handful of times. I think it's something that I'm glad that you've sort of brought that back. And I hope that becomes the norm, because it sort of takes the agency away from these sort of excessive products. Just because you want to you want to play the game doesn't mean you have to buy a starter set. Some of us have been playing trading card games for years. We don't want that basic sort of experience. Now, there is a couple other questions that I do just want to really quickly hit on. Do you have any plan for any sort of, obviously it's a big conversation topic in trading card games, what is called a reserve list, like cards that will never get printed again? Obviously, sample cards are never getting printed again or anything like that, but effects, characters and stuff like that will never see reprint. Do you have some plan about that?
Well, in the Kickstarter, we have Jason's song. We have Neffel and Argayu and Neffel's tag team. And the one that was. So those are 3 examples of cards that won't get printed again. And the dark rares, if we do the same dark rares for the D Spirits, they won't have the same ability. But I'm not planning on them. I'm not planning on printing them again as well. So those are very rare cards. And then the Kickstarter as a whole won't be reprinted again.
Right. But but like you said, the characters' effects will be reoccurring in base set from the Kickstarter set, right?
That's correct.
So the cards that won't be reprinted again will be legal for tournament play or not legal for tournament play?
They can still be used in tournament.
Okay, cool. So I bet obviously if I know there's a big struggle with, price point for entry versus competitive deck things. So obviously if something goes onto and will not be printed again, for example, like tag team, the guy who tag team, obviously something to think about is if that becomes a vital card for tournament play, what do you do to mitigate that?
I'm pretty confident that a lot of our cards are so really good as far as abilities and things like that, that I honestly don't see that will be a case. I don't think that it'll take away the significance or the power of that card, but I don't think that the ability of not being able to get a reprinted version will limit people's play.
Okay, awesome. All right, well, hearing that now at this early stage really fills me with confidence that you're really looking to make this game accessible. You mentioned before how much you didn't want this game to be a pay-for-play game, like so many of that experience, like Yu-Gi-Oh! and other games do become after a while. So I'm super excited about that. Now, one last community question that I got back from there, something that a couple of people mentioned. Do you think D-Spirits for expansions will go back to Kickstarter, or is that it for D-Spirits on Kickstarter? No more Kickstarter. It's just going to be, all the products are just going to come out through the normal distribution chains.
I'm laughing because well, I don't want to get into that. Actually, the Kickstarter for the original D-Spirits was not even planned. It was planned partially, but not all the way. So I honestly do not want to go to Kickstarter again for another set. If we do something Kickstarter related for D-Spirits, I would think it would be in a different like media form, like a game or like that, but not directly for the card game, no.
Awesome. Okay, well, that's obviously a big conversation topic in the current zeitgeist for trading card game players. So a lot of other people asked other questions. I got one just today. Do you want to speak to anything to do with like some people are finding in their Kickstarter product that there is clusters of certain cards and stuff like that? Is that something that you're going to look at moving forward?
Oh yeah, I am aware of the clumping. That obviously wasn't something that was intended. So it is something that I have already addressed with the D-Spirits staff, and I, am planning, and I, really want to 100% make sure that that's not the case for our next set that we have coming out.
Awesome. Well, as we were talking about, those lessons never stop, right? Like obviously, things happen. There's this is a whole new experience for many people in the trading card game space at the moment. So learning, moving forward, only make the mistake once, and then it's all sorted.
Oh yeah, you learn, you perfect through learning. So it's just one of those things that, okay, that wasn't something that was intended, with a lot of different aspects, of course. But when you see it, you recognize it, you pinpoint it, and you know that, okay, then going forward, this is something that we need to change, or at least address more.
That's awesome. Well, hey, let's put a positive spin on it. I always like going out on an optimistic note. That's why I love your products. It's just more excuse for people to trade more.
Mm-hmm. Yep. that's all it is. But I do understand the excitement of opening up a pack and getting a bunch of different D-Spirits versus, clones of each one.
Now, we do have one final thing to go out on the episode of, and that is Kraken Questions.
Release the Kraken.
So Kraken Questions is a fun little silly game where you get to choose one of these color booster packs. I'll crack it open. 4 lightning round silly questions. 1 more serious game design related question. You tell me which color you want. We'll see what you get.
I think I'll do the yellow, the color of Gayu.
Gayu, nice. All right, let's have a look. So your Kraken questions to go out on the interview are, all right, question. They're silly, I told you. Common question number 1. Would you rather live in a tree house or a boathouse?
Oh, a boathouse like on a yacht?
Yeah, baby.
Oh, okay. Definitely. Yeah, I'm not gonna live in no tree.
You can go anywhere then. The tree's going to stay in one spot.
Oh yeah, like nah, I'd rather pass on that.
That's awesome. Well, while you're on your yacht, your second question, again, these are randomized. What sea animal would you be if you could be a sea animal?
What would I be? I think I would be maybe two different ones. I would either be a dolphin or I would be a shark.
Oh, nice. Either a peacemaker or a war maker. I don't know what's going on there.
I feel like the dolphin is like fun, they're like intelligent, jolly. But then on the other hand, the shark is like, I'm not gonna say that's the lion of the sea, but they rule the sea. Like if you see a shark coming, get away.
Leave me the F alone.
Yeah, I love the shark. It's boss energy.
All right, so common question number 3. What is your longest ever video game save file?
Oh my God, definitely Pokemon.
Do you remember which one?
Pokemon Diamond.
Oh, wow.
I don't even know the hours on it, but I maxed out the amount of hours that the game can count. So it's over 999 hours. I don't even know how many hours it really is, but
that's amazing. Have you picked up the latest Pokemon game or even the remake of Diamond?
No, but I did pick up Legends Arceus.
That's the one. Yeah.
As you can imagine, I have not had much time to play it, but the parts I have played, I do like it a lot.
Hey, well, you've got it for the end of that 50-year plan-ish. At the end there, you can sit back.
Maybe once I'm rocking in my chair, I can sit down, turn the switch on and start playing it.
Clock up another 999 hours on it.
Oh God, I can't imagine. I can't do that on any game now, but during the time when I had nothing going on, it was more easier.
Now, obviously, you only designed the one game, so I'm going to make this anything throughout your career. You've had an extensive career for somebody so young. And the rare question of the booster pack is this one. It is, what is the unrealized project that you were disappointed never came to fruition of your career? Is there something that you've always wanted to happen that hasn't happened just yet?
I'm trying to think project-wise. Have I done something that has not done? I could answer that in a couple of different ways. I won't say so. So this is how I'll answer it. I won't answer it to say it won't happen because it will happen. But Dspirits actually kind of got in the way of it. Now I am very disappointed that I have not done my films for my other series, and I have not done more books for my other series. And those are things that I still plan on doing. It's just that I haven't done them. And I thought they would have been done a lot sooner. But once I did the Kickstarter with Dspirits, that kind of just like really took over. So I haven't had time just yet, but I am expanding into, like I said, to other people handling different aspects of SterlingCartoons and Dspirits. So hopefully soon we will have more comics and feature films based off of my other intellectual properties.
That is awesome. Well, you mentioned before that Hayao Miyazaki was a huge inspiration for you. I hope that you are the next Hayao Miyazaki or Walt Disney or whatever. I hope that this is I think that I hope that people are able to go along one day, like, they can do with My Neighbor Totoro, like they can do with Spirited Away or anything like that and go, oh, I recognize that art style. That's got to be a Sterling Cartoons product.
Oh, yeah. If I can measure up to even a toenail of their talent and history and legacy they've left, I would be very honored.
Well, I'm so excited to watch that journey evolve and just starting at this ground floor of Dspirits. I can't wait until the animations come out, the shorts come out. It's going to be a fantastic ride to watch evolve. We're in a new era now, and I can't wait for you to show off and show us all these other things. I learned about those other franchises you mentioned that you hadn't gone back to. I watched a few of them and stuff like that, and I can't wait to see a little bit more in there as well. So thank you so much for joining me today, Sterling. Goodbye from me. Goodbye from you.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. And just want to thank everybody for watching. And just stay tuned. Dspirits is about to take the world by storm.
Now, obviously, in the description, you're going to see a million things linked. You're going to see the Dspirits YouTube where you can check out that video I mentioned. You're going to see the Discord. You're going to see the Instagram that is just absolutely gorgeous. The Facebook. Check it all out. I'll make sure everything's available, and I'll try and even throw a couple of links to some of the other Sterling Cartoon stuff for those of you who are curious. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you again to Sterling. And remember, until next time, keep shuffling.
Bye.
And there you have it, our episode with SterlingCartoons. That was an amazing time I had talking to Sterling and learning all about this new game, Dspirits. Now, check it out if it seems like it's your sort of thing. I think it feels like a really good throwback to those sort of games of old. And I'm super excited to see how all those things that we talked about in the episode come together. I can't wait to see what Sterling does with that game and what his team does with that game as it starts to grow. Now, remember, find all the links for Dspirit stuff in the description. There's YouTube, there's Instagram, there's Discord, of course. That is a very active place for these new generation of trading card games, and be sure to check it out. Now, as for me, I have been Rands, and of course you can find me via the social medias. It is facebook.com/CCG History. There I'm not particularly active, but however, on Twitter, you can find me. That is twitter.com/CCG History, of course. Now, reach out to me there, or if you'd rather send me something a little bit more long form, there is an email for this particular podcast. That is theboosterpack@ccghistory.com. And you'll probably see it linked in the description as well if you venture that far down. But there is also a listener survey where you can let us know what sort of shows you want to hear on this channel. Like if you want to hear particular games spoken about, if you want to hear specific creators spoken from, happen to tell me what sort of games you're into, so that way I can start to tailor the episodes more towards what you let me know as far as feedback goes. Now, also, if it's not just history we cover, obviously this episode has proven so if there is a modern trading card game that you have a little bit of interest in, or you want to hear from about one of the creators, one of these new ones or whatnot, or you have any more questions for Sterling, let me know. We're going to discuss having another episode at some point further down the line, and I cannot wait to speak again and revisit where the brand is at in that time. Okay, that's it from me. Thank you so much for joining us again. And as always, I have said it once, and I will say it again on the way out.